Hours after President Trump's speech on early Wednesday morning, the day after the election, you said it's incumbent on him to come forward with the evidence. There have now been 34 court cases the president has lost. We saw Pennsylvania last night. We saw Pat Toomey, the senator from Pennsylvania, say it's time for the president to enable this transition. It's time for the president to concede. The president's response was to attack Pat Toomey on Twitter. Is it finally time for this to end?
Yes. And here's the reason why. The president has had an opportunity to access the courts. And I said to you, George, starting at 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, if you've got the evidence of fraud, present it. And what's happened here is, quite frankly, the conduct of the president's legal team has been a national embarrassment. Sidney Powell accusing Governor Brian Kemp of a crime on television, yet being unwilling to go on TV and defend and lay out the evidence that she supposedly has. This is outrageous conduct by any lawyer. And notice, George, they won't do it inside the courtroom. They allege fraud outside the courtroom, but when they go inside the courtroom, they don't plead fraud and they don't argue fraud. This is what I was concerned about at 2:30 in the morning on Wednesday night. Listen, I've been a supporter of the president's. I voted for him twice. But elections have consequences. And we cannot continue to act as if something happened here that didn't happen. You have an obligation to present the evidence. The evidence has not been presented. And you must conclude, as Tucker Carlson even concluded the other night, that if you're unwilling to come forward and present the evidence, it must mean the evidence doesn't exist. That's what I was concerned about starting on election night, and I remain concerned today. I think it's wrong. I think what you've heard lots of Republicans starting to say this. I said it on election night, and I hope more say it going forward, because the country is what has to matter the most. As much as I'm a strong Republican and I love my party, it's the country that has to come first.
We're now at the point where Trump's own advisors are calling on him to concede and referring to his legal team as a national embarrassment. I'll tell you what, I never actually expected Trump to unify the nation, but watching Democrats and Republicans come together to cringe at his efforts to steal the election are at least a little bit praiseworthy. The statements by Christie come in the aftermath of what has been an absolute circus at the hands of Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, Trump's most visible lawyers in his crusade to undermine the election results, circumvent the will of the American people, and just declare himself the winner. It started with Giuliani holding a press conference in the parking lot of a landscaping company located between a sex shop and a crematorium, where he declared mass fraud on behalf of the Democrats to steal the election from Trump. Only when it was time for Giuliani to actually show up in court and try to get the judge to toss out all mail ballots in Pennsylvania, the judge not only delivered a ruling dismissing Giuliani's suit with prejudice, meaning it can't be refiled, but wrote, "Plaintiffs asked this court to disenfranchise almost 7 million voters. One might expect that when seeking such a startling outcome, a plaintiff would come formidably armed with compelling legal arguments and factual proof of rampant corruption. That has not happened. Instead, this court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations, unpled in the operative complaint and unsupported by evidence. In the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its 6th most populated state. Our people, laws, and institutions demand more." Not only was Rudy's case a disaster, but the judge, who is a member of the Federalist Society, made sure that Rudy would be thoroughly humiliated as well. And now, cue Sidney Powell, another Trump lawyer, who has miraculously managed to make Rudy look relatively sane. She first held a press conference claiming some conspiracy between China, Cuba, and Venezuela, along with Dominion voting systems, and somehow even managed to invoke the former president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, who died in 2013.
Here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election after one constitutional referendum came out the way he did not want it to come out. We have one very strong witness who has explained how it all works. His affidavit is attached to the pleadings of Lynn Wood in the lawsuit he filed in Georgia. It is a stunning, detailed, affidavit because he was with Hugo Chavez while he was being briefed on how it worked.
And that was followed by an even more absurd interview where she then blamed Georgia's Republican governor and Secretary of State for being in cahoots with the CIA and benefiting financially from installing voting systems that would then deprive Trump of the presidency.
Let me ask you about the state of Georgia. Obviously, yesterday, the governor there, he certified the election for Joe Biden. It's about 12,000 votes. And what you see, will Georgia switch?
Yeah, that's a total farce. Georgia's probably going to be the first state I'm going to blow up, and Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State need to go with it because they're in on the Dominion scam with their last-minute purchase or award of a contract to Dominion of $100 million. The State Bureau of Investigation for Georgia ought to be looking into the financial benefits received by Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State's family about that time. And another benefit Dominion was created to award is what I would call election insurance. That's why Hugo Chavez had it created in the first place. But I also wonder where he got the technology, where it actually came from, because I think it's hammer and scorecard from the CIA.
So either Georgia's Republican officials did conspire with the CIA to steal the election from their own party's president so they could collect election insurance per a scheme coordinated by Venezuela's Hugo Chavez before he died in 2013, or Chris Christie is right, and this entire legal strategy by the Trump campaign is nothing more than a national embarrassment. And I don't think you have to think too hard to come up with the right answer here. The fact is that every single Republican should be condemning what is clearly nothing more than a sideshow. And that dam has already been broken, with people like Republican Senator Ben Sasse saying, quote, "Based on what I've read in their filings, when Trump campaign lawyers have stood before courts under oath, they have repeatedly refused to actually allege grand fraud because there are legal consequences for lying to judges." Mitt Romney tweeted, "Having failed to make even a plausible case of widespread fraud or conspiracy before any court of law, the president has now resorted to overt pressure on state and local officials to subvert the will of the people and overturn the election. It is difficult to imagine a worse, more undemocratic action by a sitting American president." Even Tucker Carlson went on air and lambasted Sidney Powell for failing to produce a shred of evidence to actually back up her wild conspiracy theories that she's been peddling on a daily basis.
On Sunday night, we texted her after watching one of her segments. What Powell was describing would amount to the single greatest crime in American history. Millions of votes stolen in a day. Democracy destroyed. The end of our centuries-old system of self-government. Not a small thing. Now, to be perfectly clear, we did not dismiss any of it. We don't dismiss anything anymore, particularly when it's related to technology. We've talked to too many Silicon Valley whistleblowers. We've seen too much. After 4 years, this may be the single most open-minded show on television. We literally do UFO segments. So that's a long way of saying we took Sidney Powell seriously. We had no intention of fighting with her. We've always respected her work. We simply wanted to see the details. How could you not want to see them? So we invited Sidney Powell on the show. We would have given her the whole hour. We would have given her the entire week, actually, and listened quietly the whole time at rapt attention. That's a big story. But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests, not a page. When we kept pressing, she got angry and told us to stop contacting her. When we checked with others around the Trump campaign, people in positions of authority, they told us Powell has never given them any evidence either, nor did she provide any today at the press conference. Powell did say that electronic voting is dangerous, and she's right. We're with her there. But she never demonstrated that a single actual vote was moved illegitimately by software from one candidate to another. Not one. So why are we telling you this? We're telling you this because it's true. And in the end, that's all that matters. The truth. It's our only hope. It's our best defense.
And look, I don't think that these Republicans, from Chris Christie all the way down to Tucker Carlson, are doing this out of their respect for the US Constitution and their reverence for the rule of law. They're doing it because they're humiliated. Sidney Powell managed to do what Donald Trump staring into a solar eclipse and suggesting nuking a hurricane and promoting injecting disinfectant couldn't. That is how much of an obvious failure this legal strategy is. She actually managed to make members of a political party that have backed someone like Donald Trump for the last 4 years vocally and shamelessly feel embarrassed. And they certainly have good reason to be. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.